What's up YouTube, Dale here from Zephyr, and today I am bringing you a budget update to Pure Fire Kings. That's right, it kind of occurred to me that I haven't done an update to Pure Fire Kings since the structure decks came out, because a lot of the builds are all Fire King Tri-Brigade, Fire King Sinful Spores, or Fire King Dogmatica. So I thought for those of you out there that only picked up 3 structure decks and are looking at how you can upgrade this without buying into another engine, can put together. So massive shout out to Donald as well, who I know was going to be, or he was an old school Fire King fan. I knew he was going to build it like a fun build, and I just said to him, look, what's your pure build looking like? And then we worked together on it, on how to make it a little bit competitive and update it to something like this. So with everything out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. I'll also show you a demo side deck at the end of the video as well, so you can kind of see what you'd be looking for to try and pick up in order to add to that element of the game as well. So for the pure build, we are going with triple Fire King High Avatar Kirin. You should know how good this card is right now. Being able to help you dodge targeted effects is really important. And triple Ponix. Now the one big issue that this deck will have in comparison to the others that are using engines, and you'll see that all of the engines pretty much have the same goal. They're all trying to get you to Ponix. The Dogmatica and the Dear Servant combo gets you to Ponix, Tri-Brigade look to get you to Ponix, and then of course the Sinful Spores get you to Ponix. So you need to try and get to this card or replace that consistency in other ways in order to do so. Now keep in mind, in this build of course you will be maxing out on the Sanctuary as well as the Ponix, because technically Sanctuary is trying to get you to the same end goal that Ponix does, it'll just be without a bit of resource. The other card that we are using in order to try and get to Ponix is 1-for-1. Now I know it's not ideal and out there, but when we're trying to build this on a not a limitation, but kind of like a spec that you are only really going to want to be using pure Fire King cards and of course hand traps, this is the only route you can really go. And then of course we are playing triple Fire King Avatar Avata, followed up by double Barong, double Garunix Sacred Fire, and 1 Fire King High Avatar Garunix. Now there is actually a loop where you just keep the destruction effect going, because you'll basically use stuff like Avatar, giving you your Garunix, looping the Garunix, destroying the Garunix, bringing it back, next standby phase, bring it back, destroy the board, go on again and again and again and again. So it's a really kind of cool loop that does work out very nicely for the deck, and it is really important in order to try and give you an additional boss monster that, bar something like a DD Crow, is always going to come back to the board and is always going to cause your opponent a decent amount of issues. It's obviously a level 8 as well, so that can help you get into your XYZ plays a little bit more once you've used it, but obviously once you do use it as overlay material, it's not going to be coming back because it does need to be destroyed. The final monster we are playing is of course the 1 Fire King Avatar Rabali. This is obviously your spell and trap negator in comparison to your Avatar, which is your monster negator. And then of course we've got triple Fire King Sanctuary and double Fire King Island. You'll see in the other hybrid builds they are looking at possibly cutting Fire King Sanctuary down to 2. But the one good thing about this build is you are going to be maxing out on everything with those particular routes to get to Ponix. Everything else from that point on are going to be Ponix targets, and that's why we are playing a 1 of Circle and a 1 of Fire King Skyburn. I really did like the idea of the other spell card that lets you special summon from the deck, Onslaught, and I thought that was a really kind of cool card. It was something that Donald had in his build, and I was like, oh, I'm interested, what does that card do? And he's like, well, basically if your opponent controls no monsters, you get to special summon a Fire King from the deck for free, you negate its effect and you destroy it during the end phase. So it's kind of a nice way of getting a free monster on the board. It's a shame it negates the effects, otherwise you'd be like, woo, let's go for Ponix all day long, but it was again another route to try and get you to your original Avatar Garunix, just to kind of constantly keep blowing up the board every time you wanted to. And then for the generic spells that are just going to help this deck thrive a little bit, he did have Torrential Tribute, and I said to him, I quite like the idea of Dark Hole. And the reason I like the idea of Dark Hole is it can be an extender for you going first, because there will be a time when you can get a Ponix to the board, you can activate Dark Hole and destroy it and then let it loop back. It's obviously a great board breaker, it's absolutely insane. Even if you do make your Garunix Eternity during your opponent's turn, yes, of course you can use Fire King Island to destroy the Garunix, but if they're able to like rebuild a board after that point and just try and wall up, a Dark Hole can still be very good, because you'll clear their board, you'll clear off your Garunix Eternity, and then this will float into 2 more Fire King monsters basically. So I thought Dark Hole, again, with a deck like this, when you're not playing as many engines, you don't have as many, like as much gas cards. You don't have as many cards that are going to be able to go, right, that can bait a really good hand trap, that can bait a really good hand trap. So you need to kind of get the balance correct of where you're going to be able to use go second cards and go first cards without clogging your deck down. Obviously, in the example of Torrential Tribute, that's a great card for going first predominantly. Whereas Dark Hole, yes, okay, it's not as great going first at all, but there are ways of being, right, okay, cool, I can actually activate Dark Hole on my board, destroying my own cards, putting them into the graveyard, and then I can loop them back from the graveyard. But more times than not, it's just a balanced card that can help you get advantage off of your own monsters being Dark Hole and your opponents. Then, of course, because we need to get Garunix, we are playing 1/1 form. Followed up by a single Call by the Grave, and because in most of my decks that are 40 card decks, when I'm playing Call by the Grave, I want to basically play a second version of Call by the Grave where there is space in the extra deck, and that's where I play Instant Fusion. And those of you that are unfamiliar with the way the Instant Fusion works, you're going to pay 1,000 life points, you're going to go into a Millenniumizer Strix. This will then protect you from cards like Draw and Lock Birds, Ash Blossoms on the right cards, and possibly any kind of other hand traps that your opponent might be using. Now, it could be more useful during your opponent's turn because obviously your opponent will then be able to use stuff like DD Crows, and that's a lot that's something that I'm seeing a lot of right now to kind of combat the Fire King strategy. Is there's a lot of DD Crows going around in the meta, so that would be great to protect you DD Crows during your turn. But keep in mind that during the end phase, Instant Fusion will destroy the Millenniumize, which is why you can then turn it if you're going second into a Relinquish Anima to steal a card, or it can become a Link Rebo going first. So again, you're trying to kind of balance your way of saying, okay, I now have access to technically 2 copies of Call by the Grave. You don't have to play if you don't want to. I just quite like the idea of being able to consistently give myself protection from stuff like Drolls and Ashes, because again, in the pure version like this, it's harder to bait out an Ash Blossom. It's harder to try and play around a Droll and Lockbird without playing extenuating engines to kind of help you do that. Moving on to the hand trap, so this is again, unfortunately, this is part of the format that we are moving into. Unless you want to build this deck as pure go second and you just want to play at a host of board breakers, you have to be playing hand traps in order to kind of counteract, so that if you get stopped, you make sure you stop your opponent, and if your opponent goes first, you don't let them go off uninterrupted. You need to have as much chance as possible to make sure that you building your board is going to be as much success as theirs. So that's why we're going to be playing triple Droll and Lockbird, triple Ash Blossom, double Nibiru, and double DD Crow. Now, obviously, apart from DD Crow, all of these got reprinted in the Rarity Collection. DD Crow did just get reprinted as a common in the most recent OTS, which I believe was 22, so you should be able to pick that up relatively easy and cheaply. Ash Blossom has now had 101 prints, and quite like in the video that I did the other day where I was saying these are 10 cards you must own as a duelist, Droll and Lockbird comes in the structure deck, Nibiru and Ash came in the Rarity Collection set, and they're definitely cards you should be picking up. You should be able to pick them up relatively cheaply at like a few quid each, maybe £10 max for a playset, but they're cards that will bounce around in pretty much 99% of your decks that you are playing, so they're a great investment. And then the last card, of course, is Infinite Impermanence, which again came with the structure deck, so you're kind of saving a bit of a cost that way as well. And the best thing about Infinite Impermanence is it doesn't run into those meta cards like Triple Tactics Thrust and Triple Tactics Talents, which again, a lot of main meta players will be playing. So depending on your local environment, you do need to kind of tailor your play style and know when to use a hand trap and when not to use a hand trap as well. So that's it for the main deck. Now moving on to the extra deck. Of course, we are playing 2 Garunix Eternity. What I really like about this card is you summon it during your opponent's turn, nice little board wipe. If you're going second, you can summon it during your turn, board wipe. So it's just a great little card, not to mention its float effect and the way of being able to deal with back row is just really, really good. Your second, or probably your best defensive rank 8 is of course Ding, and the reason Ding is so good is because it will allow you to protect from destruction of your Fire King Island. Now obviously I know Sanctuary protects the Fire King Island, but if your opponent's like, right, okay, cool, I'm going to go for your Sanctuary first, or I'm going to activate Lightning Storm, Ding can protect all of it, and then on top of that, you then have the ability to protect the Fire King Island through the Sanctuary as well, should they have a second way of being able to destroy it. So it just gives you the best all-round protection. Not to mention that when you summon it, you get a send. So in the mirror match, summon down Ding, send their Fire King Island without destroying it, and it will nuke their entire board. And then just as another alternative option, so if you want to deal with spells and traps or be defensive against spells and traps, bar stuff like Droplets and Dark Rulers, you can go for Hope Harbinger. And you need to remember as well, Hope Harbinger has the ability to redeclare attacks. So that's one thing that a lot of people forget, that when you put this on the board, you can actually have that ability to control the attack targets. If you don't want to play Hope Harbinger, I would highly advise probably playing Ding at 2, just because it is that good in the build. Just being able to make a second Ding to send another card on the next turn is really important. I've then got the one Bagooska card. Now, you can play Fire King, Fire Fist, Tiger King, But if you're going to play that, you'd probably be playing cards like Tenki as well, just to kind of minimize your monster count. But because we want to be able to use our monsters as much as possible, they're going to be more effective for us than a Tenki. I decided to go with something like Baguska. And this is just one of them ones where if you have the ability to get 2 level 4s on the board, you go Baguska and you just really slow down your opponent for a turn or two. And that just gives you the time to regain a bit of resource. Don't have to play it again. This can very easily be Gaga Cowboy if you need a time con option. It can be Tornado Dragon if you need back row hate more consistently. It can also be a Castell if you want to go retro as well. So you've got loads of different options. Another one is Crooked Cook, and that just becomes a massive like defensive card, but all comes down to your personal play style and preference. Then for the link ones, of course, we've got the Relinquish Anima, Link Rebo, so defensive and aggressive. You've got your Relinquish Anima, your Salaman Great Almirage, because this is your fire monster. So this one can not only can it protect certain one card from destruction, but it also has that ability that if you have a normal summon monster that isn't a fire, which apart from something like a Draw and Lockbird, like if you open up hand traps that aren't Ash, and you have Draw and Lockbird, you can normal summon Draw and Lockbird and then turn that into an Almirage, and then you hard open like a Fire King Island or a Sanctuary, but you know other fire monsters. Oh no, it will happen sometimes. You have a route to get to a fire monster to then trigger off your Fire King Island, and that will get the ball rolling for you. Then, of course, we've got Heat of the Fire Charmer, just pretty good for this deck. Pit Knight Early. I actually really like this card in this deck, especially when you're playing the Garunics. Yes, okay, this will come back in the end phase once the Garunic has nuked up the board, but because you're playing the original Garunics as well, it just means you're always going to get a Link 2 that's constantly going to be able to float. On top of that as well, if you were to make the rank 8 Garunics Eternity during your opponent's turn and you put it to a zone that Pit Knight Early points to, it will also allow you to go Chaining 1 Garunix to destroy the board, Chaining 2 Pit Knight instantly because it's a win effect to negate one of your opponent's monsters and turn it to 0. So if that opponent's monster can be targeted but it can't be destroyed by card effect, if you're able to go Chaining 1 this, Chaining 2 this, reduce it to 0 and negate its effect, and then you'll nuke the board, it's a really kind of cool combo because then you guarantee that Pit Knight is going to come back anyway, so that if you do use Fire King Island to destroy the Eternity, you'll already have a Pit Knight with 1500 plus 2 more level 8s coming back to the board. Really kind of cool. One Salaman Great Sunlight Wolf. You don't have to play this, but this is just in here because it's a generic like Fire Link 2 that will allow you to regain a bit of resource from the graveyard. Again, any of the other cards that I've mentioned prior to this, you can very easily add into your list. So stuff like your Gaga Cowboy, your Tornado Dragon, Crooked Cook, you know, you've got options. I've then got the one Heat Soul. So the way you make this is you'll need to specifically have a level 1 to get into Link Karibo. It's obviously a lot easier when you're playing the Sinful Spoils engine because you just get more monsters to the board in general. But the idea is you're going to be able to go into Link Karibo, you'll go into Sunlight Wolf, and you put these two together to Heat Soul. And because you're playing so many hand traps, you'll kind of want to play something like Heat Soul to just draw additional cards and move it forward that way. Again, entirely up to you. You can cut it out for an IP Masquerena, but the reason I didn't put IP in this is because IP on itself is like £10 to £15 a copy. So I was like, okay, let's try and keep it to a budget option. If anything, you can even bump up the Pit Knight because I really like this, or play the other Pit Knight as well. It's not as good as early, but it does float back, so it's kind of cool. Nightmare Unicorn. Moving into a Mech Knight Crusader Avramax. This can very easily be an Appaloosa if you're playing IP Masquerena, and then the other card it can be is a Boral Sword. The reason I quite like Avramax is if you're on a tight budget and you can't decide whether you want a defensive card or an offensive card, Avramax is one of the cards that can kind of cover both. It is a little bit tricky to deal with, and when they deal with it, you'll get some form of benefit from it, but it's just a nice option to bring the towers on the board. Obviously, if you have the ability to put in IP Masquerena, that's where I try and find a space for it and then still play Avramax because you still want that out-and-out boss monster. But like I said, you can very easily put Boral Sword in here if you wanted to as well. And then the last card, of course, is the Millenniumizer Strict, which comes off your instant fusion. So it's another one of them examples that if you're not playing the instant fusion, you don't need to play the Millenniumizer Strict, and that then opens up your IP Masquerena space. So that's it for the entire main deck and the extra deck. Now what I'm going to do is show you a demo side deck. So as you'll notice in this side deck, I'm only going to show you 12 cards because I kind of want to show you the baseline of what you could be looking for, and then those last remaining 3 cards can be down to your local environment. They can be more back row hate, which would be Cosmic Cyclones. They can be time con options, which can be a Gaga Cowboy. It can be a Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood, and then it could be like pretty much anything else you see fit. But I would definitely be looking at playing Dino Wrestler Prankatops. This is just a great card for going second. It can help you deal with Floodgates. It's a 1-for-1 trade. If not, your opponent not being able to stop it, you can special summon down Prankatops, go to battle phase, kill their SP Little Knight, and then in main phase 2, you can use Prankatops to pop itself and pop another card, and then you've got a completely empty field, so you then have more options. Not to mention, in battle phase as well, you'll also have the ability to attack with Prankatops, And then you have the ability as a quick effect to tribute this in the battle phase, to then pop another card your opponent controls, and then while you've got an empty board, that's when you can just go, okay, cool, evenly matched. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to bait out forms of interruption from your opponent before you get to evenly matched. The only other monster we play is the third Nibiru. Now this can very easily be a third Dark Hole if you want it to. I just kind of felt that of all the hand traps, you could very easily put a DD Crow in here as well. It was like, if your opponent is going wombo combo, then you could very easily put Nibiru in. But the way that I kind of thought about it was, if your opponent sees Nibiru game one, because they know you're maining it, they're probably going to be a lot more cautious and they'll play around it a lot more, unless their deck naturally can't do that. If their deck naturally can do that, then obviously you will need to cleverly think of going, right, well, I don't want to put a third Nibiru in, 2 might be enough. I will put in other cards such as evenly matched. Now, obviously, I'll skip the spells a little bit just to show you evenly matched because it kind of combos off more with the Prankatops, but I really do like evenly matched. And that's one of the ones that I said again previously in one of my other videos where if you're going to buy, if you like the Track Trick Structure deck because it's a nice control option, and you like the Fire King deck because it's a nice combo option, or like a middle ground of a little bit more stronger, you would actually end up with a playset of Ash Blossom, a playset of Evenly Matched, plus a playset of Imperm and Droll. So you're pretty much covering all your bases. And then moving on to the spells, we've got Triple Dark Ruler and no more. Like, being able to go Dark Ruler and then make Garunix Eternity to nuke off their board is really, really kind of cool. If you want to, you can upgrade it to Droplets, but I feel Dark Ruler no more, especially in the pure version where you want to maintain your resource a lot more, can be much more effective for you. And you're only going to be sliding this in when you know for sure you're going second, so that's when it's going to become its most effective. And then, of course, we've got 2 Lightning Storms and 1 Harpy's Feather Duster. If you can't get hold of Lightning Storms, even like they've come in the Rarity Collection set. My advice for any new duelist returning like this is look at the singles from the Rarity Collection set. I'm not saying go out and buy a Rarity Collection set because I know they can be a little bit pricey and each pack is a little bit expensive, but you're better off going out there and you can cherry pick and build all of the cards that you might need, and it'll probably cost you way less than getting a box. Obviously, with a box, you get the options of Quarter Centuries, Collector Rares, and everything else. But the issue with those are you can't guarantee you're going to get the high value ones, so it's always going to be risk and reward. Whereas if you're like, I just want to build the deck as cheap as I possibly can, you can look at getting these cards in Super Rare very, very cheaply. You can look at stuff like Triple Tactics Talents as well if you wanted to push the boat out a little bit further, but it really is entirely up to you. And then, like I said, the last 3 remaining slots that I'm not going to show you, or I don't, because I couldn't find my Cosmic Cyclones, basically, that's what I would put in, is Cosmic Cyclones and then probably Dark Hole, like the 3rd copy of that. But that would then come down to your local environment. If you can think about playing a Floodgate that's really good for you, stuff like Anti-Spell or Summon Limit, then you can roll that with it, because if your locals is all Runics, you could look at playing something like that. You could also look at playing stuff that is a bit more board breaker options. You can go for Torrential Tribute if you want to keep it more on a tidy budget. You can play Kaijus if your opponent is building up tower monsters that you can't get rid of. Go for Kaijus, that will help you get rid of it. So this is just like an example of what a demo, my personal demo side deck would look like. And then 3 more additional cards for me would probably be Cosmic Cyclone. But then it really does come down to your local environment. Like, all side decks will pretty much always change. But as I've mentioned in previous videos before, what you want to kind of break the categories down to when you're building your side deck of 15 is you go, right, okay, I want to make sure I have some form of back row hate in one way or another. I want to make sure I have a card of negation that my opponent cannot respond to. I've got that covered. I want to make sure that I have the ability to rip apart an entire board. On top of already having Lightning Storm and Dark Hole in the main deck, you also have Evenly Matched, which is an out-and-out board breaker. Then you kind of want a card that's going to help you consistently go second, and that's where your Prankatop comes in. And then if you're not putting in additional cards because of your specific environment, you want to bump up a hand trap that you're not already maxing out of in the main deck that can help you in certain matchups. Like I said, if your local environment, they're always protected against the Nibiru and they're always playing around it, you have 2 additional spots in the main deck, and you've got 1 you can take out of the side deck, and you can put in any other option that really kind of suits that environment you're taking it to. Anyway, that is it for the entire profile and the side deck. Like I said, I've kept this on a very tidy budget. When you are looking to upgrade this, not saying that you can't, you can very easily build a Tri-Brigade version on a budget, and you can very easily build a Sinful Spores and a Dogmatica one. Before a lot of you go, how do you make Sinful Spores budget? I've done 2 videos on that on the channel already. So go and check that out. That will definitely show you how you can make the deck budget, and it still works really nicely, because what you do is you utilize the cheaper cards in the Sinful engine that still synergize with the deck. When you're looking at Yu-Gi-Oh, the cards that are costing the most are cards that provide consistency to decks. When you look at Wanted Sinful Spoils, that is consistency to the Sinful engine. When you look at stuff like Bonfire coming out soon, that is providing you consistency to the Snake Eye engine. When you're looking at Triple Tactics Thrust, consistency. They're the cards that are going to cost you the most, and that's why you need to try and find ways, if you are on a tight budget, of playing around it, because at the end of the day, what you really want to be trying to do as a duelist is you want to be able to go to locals. You don't want to get spanked every single week because then you get demoralized, but you want to still be able to go to locals. You still want to compete. You want to be pushing, trying to win the locals. But even if you don't win locals, all it takes is one lucky OTS pack. You pull a high rarity ulti. You then sell or trade that high rarity ulti to get the remaining cards for the deck that is missing. It is as easy as that. I've seen so many players that new and old that have come back to the game or have that are new to the game, go to a locals, pull an insanely high rarity card from the OTS pack, and as long as you have a local organizer there that can help you make sure that you get the correct value for that card, you actually end up upgrading your entire deck and taking it up an entire level just because of one local environment or one local lucky pull, anything like that. The same can be said for sneak peeks, which is really, really kind of cool as well, and that will give you as many options as possible in order to take your deck up a level without having to break the bank. That's just my personal tip from the end of the video. Something a little bit new, something a little bit different, to try and end the video on a nice positive tip to kind of help you improve and get the deck better. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this version. I hope it's something that is a little bit different from what you've seen out there. I feel that there are a lot of, here's a structure deck, cool. Now let's look at the Tri-Brigade, Dogmatica and Sinful Spoils version. And I thought, you know what, I'll do a pure version first, just kind of start it back to scratch, show you where this has come since the structure deck's been released, and then show you or work you into the upgrades onto how Dogmatica now looks and how the Sinful looks and how the Tri-Brigade version looks now. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. Till next time, as absolutely always, stay safe and, of course, happy dueling.